Comparison is the thief of joy. Theodore Roosevelt.
Maybe you don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
No kings, no way. Around here, we like to use the hashtag #WeBuildMachines. However, I'm acutely aware that you could just as often substitute it with the hashtag #WeBuildMonsters. And I don't mean that in a positive way. Anytime that you're working to build up bodies and spirits and to help people break into new personal levels, it's inevitable that some egos will overinflate. They'll grow bigger and bigger, heavier and more cumbersome, and eventually, those Hindenburgian egos will come crashing down. And it's going to hurt. Let me start by saying this. I've never had a bad day rock climbing, and I've never had a bad day training. Have I performed poorly? Absolutely. Have I sucked at climbing sometimes? Definitely. But I'm in the woods climbing rocks, or I'm at the gym working to better myself. I chose those things. What could possibly make me upset to be there? You failed on your project, lowered off, dejected, and then somebody warmed up on it. You suck, you'll never be good, you may as well quit. Don't be an idiot. That person was once where you are. That wasn't always their warm-up, and their project is someone else's warm-up. Don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle. While I was projecting Transworld Depravity, the hardest route I've sent, I had the pleasure of watching a then unknown Alex Magos flash it as a warm-up. I watched several friends send it much faster than I did. This didn't diminish at all the feeling I felt when I finally clipped the chains. There's another thing it didn't do. It didn't diminish the psych I felt at seeing a random person send their first 11B, which incidentally was my warm-up that day. They were inspired to see me climb and downclimb it without chalking, same as I was to watch a young, rosy-cheeked Magos walk Transworld Depravity a year prior. For the last couple of years, I've listened over and over to the album No Kings by one of my favorite hip-hop collectives, Doomtree. Its concept is simple, one we could all do well to live by. There are no kings. There are no peasants. Your battle on your project is no different than Sharma battling on First Round, First Minute, or Nale on his multi-year Lapnor project, which became Burden of Dreams. It's no different than a beginner slapping and clawing their way up their first 5-9. This is a personal struggle. If, for some reason, you believe that yours ranks higher than that of someone else, then your biggest struggle isn't on the rock at all. I've built machines. I've also built monsters. Frankly, I feel bad about it. Climbing can't be much fun when you're mostly concerned about how you compare to everyone else.
Okay. Hi, I'm Brittany Hoffman, and I'm trapped in Wisconsin.
and also my trusted and personal advisor in all things life and communication.
Yeah. We have no official title for me. We do not know how to set it up. Now. Yeah. Okay. I deserve a raise based on that title. No, I'm just kidding.
You probably do anyway, actually. You should talk to Lana about that. She pays everybody.
Okay, great. I'll talk to her later. Schedule that in. Hey, Lana, give me a raise.
I don't know when she gives herself raises, so.
Oh my God, really? That's so funny.
Who knows how much money she makes? No. we discuss it.
I love that. I guess I was preparing to talk to the wrong person the whole time. No, I'm just kidding.
So this essay, No Kings, No Way, the title was based on the concept from a Doomtree album. And I don't know how much you've listened to Doomtree or if you ever
Not
have.
at all.
As a Midwesterner, you should do so. Especially Dessa, the female rapper, is fucking incredible.
Well, I will look into
from
it.
Doomtree. So you should do that. But anyway, what was it about this essay? Between you, Lana, and myself, we've all seen these chapters probably more than any other human.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And you immediately wanted this one. Why?
I did, without even thinking through it. A few reasons. And I'm not even totally sure exactly why, but something did just come to mind as you were asking me that. But I remember when you gave me the really rough first edition of the book, and I was reading through all the essays, I think like that same night that you'd sent me the files. And I remember so vividly getting to this essay and it just stopping me in my tracks. I'm not totally sure why. I mean, there's this like level of introspection, but also level of kind of acknowledgement of particular patterns of behavior or just things that are very common in climbing. And I remember, well, I mean, I get emotional about everything, but I totally remember it making me emotional. And it just occurred to me that you do talk about yourself a lot in the book and you put it in context of your own experience. But this felt specifically like a hard truth that was about Chris Hampton and like you looking at the work that you've done and thinking like, but sometimes this sort of work does lead to more sort of toxicity and behavior. And like, it was like you were asking yourself the question of like, how do I value deconstructing that and making sure people know that I value that? And that's why it felt like a really important moment in the book to me, because, you know, there's a lot of lessons about climbing and about working hard and about discipline. But I think one thing we talked about really early on about Power Company in general is that being a better climber doesn't just mean being good at climbing.
Right.
It means being a better climber, a better partner, a better person to have at the crag, a better person to be around and be in community with. Yeah. And I think this essay really speaks to that for me, and is about community more than just practice.
It definitely speaks to my struggle with if I am a voice in this community, do I need to be perfect? Do I, you know, if I'm doing something to build up some people and it goes overboard for some other people, am I responsible for that mistake of, you know, overblowing their egos, helping them get these overblown egos, and then how they treat other climbers because of that? Am I partly responsible for their value system that I don't agree with anymore?
Right.
So it's definitely me struggling with that, you know, and basically saying I'm doing the best I can, but I want to learn how to do better.
Yeah, I think that was what really spoke to me. I think I'm not actually a big self-help fan, like in general, of like self-help books. I don't seek them out, and I don't like people telling me what to do.
I feel you on that.
I like people to tell me what they do, and then I decide if I think it would be a good idea for me or not. Yes. But one thing that I really appreciate in any type of book that's offering advice is just kind of a brutally honest take. And I think this was kind of, and maybe for me, when I read this chapter, I was like, I feel really aligned with this company, like reading this and knowing like, this is something you're grappling with. Like, this is something you're thinking about. And not only that, this is something you're willing to put in your first book and say, I feel strongly enough about this issue or this complexity of my work that I need to say something about it, that I need you to know I'm struggling with it. So I think it was just like a very big turning point for me, not just in the book, which I think it really helped me have a better vision for where you were coming from with the book, but also helped me contextualize how you saw your own work and what Power Company really was too.
That's great. I'm glad that's what came through in it. There's a lot of this sort of dichotomy that I wrestle with when it comes to Power Company in general. Part of making media in the way that I do is often celebrating the wins or celebrating the really strong, really good climbers, and I think that sort of media can be really harmful. You can balance it out over time. I use the word balance very lightly there. But over time, you can show all different aspects. But what if the only post that the Instagram algorithm shows to a person is the one that feels the worst to them,
Right.
So I'm always thinking about these things, how to add nuance into internet posts and into the book. And it's funny, I was thinking about the song the other day, No Kings, that this title came from. And Sims, one of the rappers in Doomtree, he says in the song, there are two things that actually relate really well to this book and to this chapter in general. Number one, he says, "You're so vain, you probably think it's about you. Well, it is, and it ain't, but it is." And I'm like, that's what the whole book is. Like, if it hurts your feelings and you feel like he's speaking directly to me, well, I wasn't writing to you, but I was,
Yeah.
And then he also says, and this is funny, I looked up these lyrics, and these aren't actually the lyrics. It's just what I've been saying for years. I'm going to choose to believe that the site I read the lyrics on is wrong and I'm right.
Correct, yeah.
But it sounds like he says, everybody's internet shit's all fucked. Yuck. And hearing that part of the song again while thinking about the context of this chapter, I was like, yeah, it kind of is all fucked and yuck, and we can try to be as nuanced as we want, and we should, but it's really hard to do.
It's really hard to do. And it's really hard to do, climbing media as an umbrella term, it's so vast now, has dramatically changed since I started climbing. And, now you have the representation of social media where people are creating their own brands, their own stories, their own narratives about climbing. And, I get to pick and choose who I'm engaging with. But when I started climbing, there really weren't that many podcasts. And, of the podcasts that I listened to, a lot of them were, like you were saying, celebrating not just the wins, but kind of the biggest winners.
Yeah.
And not talking about the more kind of, I guess, average person experiences in climbing. And that's another thing in this chapter I really like, that it talks about, being at the crag and being as excited for somebody else that they just climbed their first 11B as you felt on your project. And sometimes I feel like that's a sort of value in community that gets a little bit overlooked in climbing. Like we look at our friend projecting like 13B or whatever, and we're like, which is a Drew warm up, right? But
that's not even a warm up anymore.
Is he warming up on 14s? But being able to kind of rid yourself of this superiority of grades or like superiority of accomplishment, and saying like, maybe that was quote unquote soft for me, but it was hard for them. They had a new skill set they had to acquire. They challenged themselves in unique ways. They had to overcome fear too. And just because the grade looks different than mine, or because I had a different experience on that route, doesn't devalue the accomplishment that they've made. And I think that's something that we can all value a little bit more in the climbing experience. And especially as someone who spent a lot of time projecting 11B around people who were projecting 14A.
Yeah.
And who were so supportive. I mean,
Right.
it's not just external. I mean, the people I was around were so psyched for me and really taught me to do that for people who I was working with or mentoring who were, not at the same level I was. But there's still this internal battle of like, well, does it even matter if I'm not climbing 13A? Like, does it even matter at that point? Should I even post about it on social media? Like, who's going to care that I sent 11C or whatever, So I really appreciated that aspect. And I think that's something I'm always trying to like keep myself from. I love climbing because I love challenging myself. And I love this idea that there's like, it's going to take a long time before I reach a real plateau where there's not going to be a lot of room for growth. But I also think it's hard to balance that and also valuing kind of being in a certain level of climbing that you don't see a lot of people being celebrated at. So
Absolutely.
that was another thing in here that really spoke to me a lot.
I think it's worth saying also that, really like delineating that sort of support goes both directions. It's that day that I was writing about, which is an entirely true story of warming up on this 11B, up, down climbing it. I was kind of speed climbing it and not chalking on purpose because that's what I needed to do on my project. I need to climb faster than my normal pace. I need to just move as quick as possible. And I'm practicing that on my warm-ups before I go to the project. And this person who was projecting that thing, it did not deter them at all, Yeah. And it can, if you watch somebody crush your project, it's very easy to get in your feelings about that and take it personal. And this person did not do that at all. So I got to be just as psyched watching them. And then I walk over to my project, which is one of the harder routes at the crag. And there's this young kid, who's like, do you mind if I try? And I'm like, I know everybody who's worked on this route or is currently working on this route. This kid is not. He's going to be on this for fucking ever working it out. And so I'm like, well, I need a long rest. So cool, go ahead. I didn't say that out loud. I just said, sure, try it. And then I watched this kid just fucking float it like it was his warm up. And it was his warm up, and turns out the kid is, now probably one of the two best climbers on the planet. And, I'd never heard of him at the time, but rather than let it get me down, I just got really excited to have seen what's possible.
Totally. Yes.
So it has to go both ways,
Yeah, absolutely.
It has to be.
There has to be value in accomplishments on both sides. Definitely.
Yeah. And I don't feel superior to that person projecting the 11B, and Alex Magos didn't feel superior to me. He was gracious and offered beta on other things later in the day and was just excited, And it was the same when that person watched me climb the 11B and when I watched Alex climb my project. So,
something that just occurred to me, because I was thinking about how I was very much on that kind of superiority trajectory, I think before I got really injured. And, I wonder if so much of it comes from like, am I going to be a part of this community of people I really want to be around?
Right.
And feeling like, and I've had so many climbers express that to me too. Like, why are they hanging out with me? Like, I don't climb the same level that they do. And it's this feeling that like you have to qualify somehow, or your value is in being able to share beta or be on the same project as someone else, when it's like, you want to be around people you really enjoy. And so it feels like, okay, in order to do that, I have to keep up. So I think that there's this very human, like, it's not just about wanting to be better than everyone else. It's also about wanting to be accepted and like be
Absolutely.
a part of be a part of something. But I think when I was really injured, I had compartment syndrome and nerve entrapment in both elbows. And I went 2 full years without really climbing. I mean, I did a few things, like I would climb a 5/8, but my entire mindset about climbing just changed so dramatically, because a day I could get on a 5/8 and go all the way to the top without letting go was the biggest accomplishment, because it felt like maybe someday I'll be able to climb again. And like, I'm outside and it's beautiful out and I'm with people I really like and I can let go whenever I want. But you're also the person with everybody else who's like, okay, you guys have fun projecting the same route 4 or 5 times. I'm going to climb one thing twice and just hang out today, and just having to be okay being that person, while also feeling this immense sense of accomplishment just from being able to climb 1 or 2 things, I think really adjusted my mindset and made me feel like, oh, I can be involved in a part of other people and involved with other people I really look up to or love in climbing, even though I'm essentially not a climber right now.
Right. I think you're exactly right. That a lot of this does stem from this desire to belong, to this community. And, when you're an adult, particularly when you're an adult, though the communities that you have access to sort of narrows. You've got your work community. Most people do. And then what?
Right.
It's the softball league. There aren't many. It's not like you're in all these social circles, and most of us aren't anyway. We get caught up in responsibilities and trapped in adulthood, and this is a community.
Yes.
So we do want to belong, and I think that brings us back to what you and I discussed in the introduction, in that we really wanted this book to not exclude people of any kind. And while it's not nearly on the same level as representation of based on race or gender or sexual orientation or whatever, there's also a need to include people who climb 5/8.
Absolutely.
Because we very often don't. We don't. We end up talking about the bigger grades. And I'm guilty of this in a lot of cases. So when I have the chance, and like we talked about in the introduction, this is something that I've really taken from our relationship, is when I have the chance, I can include those people in the way that I write, in the way that I talk on this podcast. So
yeah, and there's an audience for it, and there's people really hungry to hear about that, I think.
Yeah.
And to hear their experience in that realm represented. It's important. And it's also important to set examples, once you are a bit more of an experienced climber, of like examples of mentorship, that like my group isn't just everyone who climbs hard at the gym that I bring outside with me. Like my group is people of all backgrounds and experiences and levels of climbing, and that actually makes for a more fun, more interesting, more creative community.
Absolutely. Well, Britt, thank you for being such a big part of this book, for being such a big part of this company and where it's headed, and helping steer it. Even if you don't know you're doing that, you are.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely helping me steer in the directions I want to go and may not know how to get there.
Sure.
That's been huge for me. So thanks.
Well, thank you. This has being involved in this is really one of the greatest accomplishments ever. I will never forget the moment that I not just in the book, but in Power Company too. But I will never forget the moment my mom finally saw my name in the book, and she was really like, it was so funny. I'd been talking about it forever, and she saw my name in a book, and she was like, "Did you guys? Hey, Brittany was like helped on a book. Did you know that?"
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
There will be more. I guarantee.
There will be more. Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow, selective learning, the short-sighted approach. We don't tweet, we scream like eagles.
Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time to build.